and it gets quiet. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Madison. I'm Teresa Holmes, Club President. Thank you all for joining us today. Today's meeting is being sponsored by Lee Schwartz and SVA. And our thanks for his support of today's luncheon. Today, we'll start the meeting by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's do that together. As you remain standing. Are you ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If you would still remain standing. Once a month, we also recite the four-way test. So let's recite that together today, Rotarians. The four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill, better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you, and you may be seated. Let's direct our attention to today's featured song. Stu Levitan will lead us in the singing of Avenu Shalom Aleichem. He tried to teach me to practice it, but I don't think I got it right, which is Hebrew for we bring peace upon you. Casey Okers will accompany him on the keyboard. Following our music, our guest will be introduced by Aaron Embry.
Thank you, President Teresa. Yes, it's Havenu Shalom Aleichem. It is an Israeli folk song. We bring peace upon you. I'd always hoped that if I got a chance to lead Rotary, it would be in a Bob Dylan song, but an Israeli polka is the next best thing. And I will sing it once, and then we'll sing it 2 more times. It's a very short song. It's only got 3 words, and it's very short verses. I'll sing it once, and then hopefully you'll come in on the second and the third verse. Maestro. Haveni Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom Aleichem. Haveni Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. Hey!
Good afternoon. I'm here to introduce our guests to the group. When I call your name, if you could please stand and remain standing to the end so we can recognize you all. Greg Armstrong, guest of Senior Service Subcommittee. Kathy Kessel, Senior Service Subcommittee. Jacob Deutsch, guest of Ariel Estrada. Rodney Sanders Jr., guest of Willie Larkin. All right. Welcome. Michelle Erickson, guest of Heidi Frankson. Amy Baskin, guest of Brian Baskin. Laura Hinklin, guest of James Ty. Kim Kay, guest of Susan Schmitz. Michelle Borkovec, guest of the Goodman Advisory Committee. Janet Dyer, guest of the Goodman Advisory Committee. Michelle Herring, guest of the Goodman Advisory Committee. Christine Reed, guest of the Goodman Advisory Committee. Mindy Vinji, guest of the Goodman Advisory Committee. And Ed Futa, visiting Rotarian from Honolulu. Please join me in welcoming our guests. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. Amy Baskin has been here several times. Woo! Did you hear that? I was just going to say she may very well be in that membership class with Ed Futa. All right, my Did You Know segment, right? So today's Did You Know segment is actually focusing on our main communication to members. Did you know that we have a monthly email? Yes, it's in the form of a newsletter and a semi-annually printed newsletter. The link to the monthly newsletter is part of the email message on the last Friday of each month. The monthly newsletter includes more detailed information from the past month, so be sure to click that link and read all about the great things that are going on in our club. So we get a every weekly Friday email, and then you get that larger one at the end of the month. In addition, this year we have added a printed newsletter that is mailed to members as well as potential new members. This was one of the recommendations from our member recruitment task force last year. The first printed newsletter was mailed last November, and you will be receiving the spring edition this week if you haven't already received it. I'd like to thank Ron Luskin, our membership recruitment officer. Is he here? Yes, Ron, yes. Our membership recruitment officer for coordinating this communication, and to Jennifer Weitzman, I don't think she's here today, for the, oh yeah, there she is, thank you, for our design and layout. They are both providing terrific service to Rotary in doing this, and I hope you enjoy reading this latest edition, as well as keeping an eye out for reading the upcoming monthly newsletters. New members. Today we have 2 new members who will be joining our club. I'll start with Michelle Harris. Would you please stand with your sponsor, Charles McClymans. Michelle has been loaned the classification of community services and is president and CEO of Goodwill South Central Wisconsin. She was born in Seattle, Washington, and came to Madison in December of 2021 from Spokane, Washington. Michelle now lives on Columbus Street in Sun Prairie. She has 2 adult children and holds a bachelor's degree in workforce education and development from Southern Illinois University at Carbondale and a master's degree in business administration from the University of Louisiana Lafayette. Michelle enjoys walking, exploring, traveling, bowling, and volunteering. Michelle, would you please remain standing, and will, excuse me, Linda Ketchum, please stand. Her sponsor is also Charles McClymans. Linda has been loaned the classification of community services and is executive director of Just Dane, an agency that offers direct service programs for individuals and families involved in the criminal justice system. She was born in Elgin, Illinois. Linda makes her home on Flora Drive in Madison with her wife, Kimberly Fisher. She has 1 teenage daughter. Linda holds a bachelor's degree in corrections and a master's degree in criminal justice sciences from Illinois State University. She serves as co-chair for the City County Homeless Issues Committee and the Dane County Recovery Coalition, as well as commissioner for the City of Madison Affirmative Action Commission. Linda is a recipient of the Mentoring Positives Muriel Pipkins Award. She enjoys gardening, reading, and walking. Please join me, Rotarians and guests, and thank Charles for connecting them to Rotary, our new Rotarians. Welcome. Joyce Bromley serves on our Senior Service Subcommittee, and she will come up and introduce our Senior Service guest.
Thank you, President Teresa. Today, we recognize Nancy T. Hayden for her broad and deep commitment to volunteering. Her contributions have focused on the care of people and the care and appreciation of nature. Remember the polio epidemic? Nancy was on the front line co-chairing a club of medical wives who took Sabin inoculation sugar cubes to the Madison schools. In the 1970s, as board chairman of the visiting nurse service, she managed to increase home delivery meal service from 50 to 200 guests. She helped develop a prescription kitchen by establishing flu shot stations in local corporations, grocery stores, and later retirement centers, something we take for granted today. Nancy was among 3 women who established a Planned Parenthood office in Madison to provide resources for women to advocate for their own health. Nancy continues to help the poorest of the poor gain access to health care. She worked with the YWCA to transition from a recreational facility to an institution to serve women of need. Out of respect for and love of nature, she founded and chaired the Arboretum Native Plant Sale to raise money for the Friends of the Arboretum. She brought a wider public appreciation of beauty and use of native vegetation in local landscapes and gardens. She continues to advocate for the use of natural fertilizers and the importance of balancing types of plants. Her interviews on Wisconsin Public Radio reach thousands of people. When you pass landscapes that feature native species and natural prairie, think of Nancy Hayden. As a member of the board of the Lakeshore Nature Preserve, she helped establish some of its philosophies. She is a primary resource person for preserving parks and natural areas for the Village of Shorewood Hills Parks Committee, on which she served for several years. Nancy would never consider herself a hero, but she is a hero to those who have worked with her and who have benefited from her many contributions. When told of this award, she was honored to have this recognition by this eminent group, whose members are the pinnacle of volunteerism. She values the contributions that Rotary has made to the health and welfare of people around the world. It is with great pleasure to present Nancy T. Hayden with our club's Senior Service Award.
All right, I have a few announcements. Next week is our annual Youth Awards Luncheon. We haven't had that in the room in some time. We will be recognizing 49 high school students for their accomplishments. Depending on the number of guest reservations, we may end up opening space across the hall from this meeting room so we are able to keep the tables and chairs spaced apart. The Friday email will provide more details once we know how many students will be attending. We are planning on making additional space during the meeting, and last Friday it was announced that the Madison Metropolitan School District has extended their face mask policy until May 6th. So that means that the students and their guests attending our meeting next week will be wearing face masks, except for when they are eating or drinking. Since they are our guests, I would like to encourage us to wear our face masks during our meeting along with our guests. This is an optional item for Rotarians, of course, but it would be a nice gesture to show the support that we could give to the students. Also, for those of you who will be watching online, the meeting will not be recorded. This afternoon, all members, including the 2 new ones, will be receiving an email from the office with a link to vote on the changes to the club's constitution and bylaws. Virginia Bartelt overviewed those over the past 2 weeks, these past 2 meetings, and we will include a link to the red line version of the document showing the edits from the past 2 Friday emails from the office. There are also copies of the document showing the changes on the back table, and please be sure to submit your vote by the deadline, which is 5 p.m. tomorrow. Birthdays. I have birthdays today to celebrate with a bit of humor and wisdom that complements the Rotary mission. We also encourage our members to make an age-appropriate gift to the Madison Rotary Foundation, rounded up to $100, for our club's Synergy Scholarship Fund. Rotarians, if you are in the room when I call your name, please stand. April 17th, Gary Peterson, who says, you can participate in Madison's multi-modal transportation system by walking, riding a bike, or taking the bus. Multi-modal. Modal. Find me. See, I'm learning about bikes, right? Yeah. April 17th, Scott Strong. April 17th, Martha Sullivan. April 18th, Kristen Euclid. Two fines. Where is our Sergeant at Arms? April 21st, Chuck Dorgan. April 22nd, Frank Byrne. April 22nd, Aaron Mullins. April 22nd, Kyle Nondorf. April 23rd, Nino Amato. Thanks to our celebrants for their contributions to the Madison Rotary Foundation. Please join me in wishing them a happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rotarians. Happy birthday to you. Maybe I will add to next week's Did You Know, the president gets fined for messing up the names. It's an annual in-house tradition. All right, I have members in the news today. Ted Baldwin was quoted in an article titled Dane County Farmers Market. Humble effort reaches a triumphant 50th year, Wisconsin State Journal, April 17th. Baltazar Deanda Santana was pictured and quoted in an article titled Latino Academy for Workforce Development, Independence Day, Community-Driven Services, the Capital City Hughes, April 4th. Mishorgi was quoted in an article titled County Extends Farm to Food Bank Program, the Cap Times, April 13th. Christian Overland was interviewed on WPR about the new Wisconsin Historical Museum coming to downtown on April 18th. Great news, Rotarians. Now, on to today's program. Today's speaker is Dr. Sheri Swokowski, who is retired Army Colonel with 35 years of service. And the title of her presentation is Changes to the Military. She's a career infantry officer who has commanded a light infantry company, deployed twice, and served on battalion, brigade, state, and department level staffs. She retired in 2004 from the Wisconsin National Guard. Post-retirement, Dr. Swokowski was a lead course instructor at the U.S. Army Force Management School, but was fired in 2007 when she transitioned. She is an internationally known advocate for transgender rights and trans military service. She currently serves on the Advocacy Advisory Council for the Modern Military Association of America and on the Board of Directors for the American Civil Liberties Union of Wisconsin. We look forward to your presentation, Dr. Swokowski, and we have made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thanks to you for speaking to us today. I would like to also mention that we will have Q&A, time allows, and I'd like to, as a reminder, note and review our Q&A four-way test. Please remember, Rotarians and guests, is it a question? Is it succinct and of interest to the audience in general? Will it add to everyone's understanding of the presentation? And lastly, is it respectful to the presenter? And I should add one more, number 5, is that the person entertaining the question does not get to hold the mic. With that, please welcome Dr. Sheri Swokowski to our podium.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be with you. And if the president gets fined for every name she messes up, I think she gets something back for pronouncing Swokowski correctly. So thanks very much. I had the opportunity to be here last week. It's kind of like a daylight recon in the military. And it proved beneficial because I found that you have a number of veterans in the organization, and you also have something called a Veterans Scholarship Committee. So if we have any veterans in the audience, I would like to just ask you to stand. Thank you all so much. Now I'm going to open up participation to everybody. And what I would like to do is ask a very simple question, and that is, how many of you have met and conversed with a transgender individual? Just a show of hands. Super, super. I can remember it wasn't too long ago, it was only 8 or 9% of people that had met a trans person. So thanks. So I probably did a few things well during my career to earn promotion to full colonel in a very competitive environment. But my development was really stunted because of my history of being a transgender woman. I'm the highest ranking out transgender individual in the nation, and there's 2 caveats with that. There's a general officer and there's an admiral that also transitioned after they retired, but they are private. And there's about 10 of us, 06s, colonels. A couple of them are still serving and the rest are retired. So I was prohibited from serving authentically while in uniform, but I did spend 2.5 years at the Pentagon, and they seemed pretty happy to have me with my skill sets there. So it can be done. I wound up my civil service career as the HR director for the region of the U.S. Forest Service out in Denver in 2013. Says equality advocate at the bottom of the slide, but I really prefer to think of myself as an educator and a communicator. This is what we're going to cover today. Transitioning military. There's a dichotomy built in here, and we'll save some time for questions at the end. But we're going to take a look at the military's complex relationship with minority groups throughout history, and both their discrimination against those minority groups and their efforts to be a change agent on the cutting edge, if you will, for equality. And if you don't know a lot about trans people, we'll have a little Trans 101 for you as well. So my story starts with my dad. He's circled there. He was deferred from serving in World War II because he was installing communication equipment on the submarines that were built up in Manitowoc, a total of 28 altogether. Nevertheless, he enlisted in 1944, went to Camp Blanding, Florida in August for training and shipped out to the European Theater of Command in early winter. You might have remembered there was a little operation going on there by the Germans at that time called the Battle of the Bulge. My dad was captured on January 28th outside of Puttscheid, Luxembourg, and held at Stalag 19B in Bad Orb, Germany. Thankfully, he was liberated on April 1st, which just happened to be Easter Sunday. And the German guards that morning had got all of the prisoners up and lined them up in a field in front of machine guns. And before they could execute them, there was another German soldier that ran up to the machine gun crews and said, "Their tanks, American tanks, are coming through the front gate." And thankfully, they decided to run and save their own lives instead of taking the lives of others. So I'm lucky to be here at all. And I'm very honored and fortunate to follow in his footsteps. So this is my authentic life, about the last 15 years or so. It was a privilege to serve the country both in uniform and as a civilian for over 40 years. Just want to run through the slides. The Action W in the Wisconsin on the tail of a KC-130 tanker indicates my time with the Wisconsin National Guard. The last 20 years were on active duty. I stayed retired for about 2 golf seasons, and 2006 went back to work as at the Army's Force Management School in Fort Belvoir. And as President said, was fired when I started living up to my own expectations instead of the expectations of others. The good news is, just a couple months later, I was hired into the Pentagon as a senior analyst and spent 2.5 years there. My best friend is a gay man who's still there. I say I escaped, but he wasn't able to, at least so far. And then the lower left, of course, is the, anybody know what that scene is? It's Maroon Bells. It's the most photographed place in Colorado, outside of Snowmass in Aspen. And that represents my service with the U.S. Forest Service. But my firing in 2007 really stoked my advocacy. In 2014, with the assistance of some of my Pentagon colleagues, I set about to get my DD 214, that's your record of military service, corrected. And it had not been done. Later on that year, 2 people from New Jersey, 2 trans people from New Jersey, did have luck in getting their record changed to reflect their authenticity. They were represented by the ACLU, so to my knowledge, I was the first one not represented by a legal organization. And that was pretty significant. Happened in a relatively short period of time, about 7 months. 2 months later, my new DD 214 showed up, and it read, Sherry Swokowski, Colonel, Army Infantry. And that was important for several reasons, because there'd never been female infantry people before. So it was DOD's recognition that, in fact, they realized they had female infantry people in their ranks really from day one. I'm proud to announce now that there are hundreds in our brigade combat teams throughout the Army. So after 10 years of being in limbo, if you will, I finally had a chance to put on a uniform again, a uniform that was to fit my authentic gender. So I'd been going back to Pentagon annually, once or twice a year, including for their DoD Pride recognition event in June. So that June of 2015, I decided to go back wearing a female uniform, which is the reason why I couldn't put a uniform on for the previous 10 years. So we did that. The news outlets out there got hold of that. The bottom right photo there is an interview I did the day before Pentagon Pride in 2015. And, excuse me, over on the middle left, another uniform shot. That was 2 weeks after Pentagon Pride. I was one of 4 individuals that was asked by the White House, transgender individuals, service members, or retirees, that was asked by the White House to come and be welcomed at their Pride Month reception. And on the middle right, lastly, is Secretary of the Army Eric Fanning, first gay secretary of the Army. You heard a lot about him being gay, but you didn't really hear a lot about him being an assistant secretary of the Navy, acting secretary of the Air Force, well-qualified individual in all regard. And that was at Pentagon Pride in 2016. So that's the short part of it. I want to look a little bit at DOD's dichotomy. Prior to 1948, Black Americans had fought in all of our nation's wars. It wasn't until the Desegregation Act ordered by President Truman to desegregate the military. Prior to that, blacks could serve, but they were only in black organizations. This opened it up. Another interesting fact, 1948, women finally could serve. And, oh, by the way, be paid the same amount as their male counterparts. So pretty significant actions back in 1948. The Women's Army Corps Act was significant. It was a good start, but it would take another 68 years before discrimination in jobs was eliminated by the military. Members of the gay community were prohibited from serving. before 1993. Of course, President Clinton came in then, and with the intention of doing away with, just making it open service. The compromise was don't ask, don't tell, and so gay people served, yet couldn't tell anybody about their true selves for some 20 years almost. Much of these changes that you see were done with the full support of our military leaders. And I hope you can read that. That was a statement from the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, talking about how we asked our service members to lie in order to defend the country. He didn't think that was right. It was an integrity issue for him, the militaries as an institution, and the individuals. Moving on, 2016, January 1st, Secretary Ash Carter opened all military jobs to women. And 6 months later, opened transgender service to everybody. And for the first time, transgender service members were authorized to get the same health care benefits that their counterparts got in the military. And that lasted for a year or two. And the previous administration, of course, came in and after consulting with somebody, I'm not sure who, they decided to ban trans service members again. And finally, thankfully, I shouldn't say finally, because it's still an open discussion, and anytime the administration changes, if we don't put it in statute, that could in fact happen again. So we're hoping it's the last time. And most recently, in April of this year, this month, federal court ruled that the military had been discriminating against HIV-positive people because they wouldn't allow them to deploy. It was a message similar that they made to about transgender people back in the day, but I can tell you from personal experience that trans people serve worldwide without any restrictions. One more quick quote. This is from Secretary of Defense Ash Carter. He included it in his announcement of open transgender service, and it just really means that DoD is a learning organization, and this was one way for them to prove it. So when Don't Ask, Don't Tell had some detractors, had some people that didn't like it, including Senator John McCain. I will tell you, a point I want to make is that Senator John McCain learned, Senator John McCain evolved, and Senator John McCain supported open transgender service. This is what happens when people operate authentically, don't have to worry about losing their jobs, being outed by others. This individual is now Commander Blake Dreeman. He's got over 15 years service, 11 deployments as a submariner, and has been promoted twice since the ban was lifted. We keep fighting. 4 or 5 months after the tweets, there were 5 of us that went up to Capitol Hill to testify before the House and Senate Armed Service Committee staffers. The picture represents over 100 years of service and 20 plus deployments, talented people, submariners. Gal on the left is the Brigade Combat Team Commander, 06 type. One's on the right, retired Marine Corps Major. Had 5 transgender people in her company of 300. And the gal on the right is an astronautical engineer currently assigned to the Space Force. So a lot of experience, a lot of military knowledge, a lot of leadership skills there. Being trans is only one thing that makes us who we are. My dissertation, not surprisingly, was also based on trans military and the fights that these people go through to get medical care. The system is broken 5 years later. These are the people that got up every morning, put on their uniforms, laced up their boots, went to their jobs to do it to the very best of their ability while knowing that their commander-in-chief or the person in the commander-in-chief position did not support them and wanted them fired. Just a couple other slides from my dissertation, the takeaways from here. It says 1,071 on the bottom. There are now over 2,000 trans active duty service members that have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. The bigger takeaway here is that the gray and the yellow represent senior enlisted and senior officer positions. This information was obtained through FOIA requests that I submitted, and it means that 86% of military transgender service members are either senior officers or senior enlisted personnel. Again, lots of experience. Trans 101, I want to start with terminology. It's been my experience testifying at the Capitol here in Madison across the street several times that the people that are voting on laws that affect trans people really don't have a clue sometimes about what they're voting on. Sex is not the same as gender. Gender identity is just your inner self knowing. It's akin to knowing that you write left-handed instead of right-handed. Not much different. Dysphoria that's caused, some of it is internal with the individual, where their body doesn't line up with their mind, and it's exacerbated by the way society treats them when they fail to recognize folks. Gender transition is multi-layered. It's a unique process. It's usually social, legal, and then health-wise, medical. Trans people can do all of them, none of them, or some of them in any order. There's no game plan. Gender affirming care is something that's regarded as positive and lessens the likelihood of complications from being transgender. And everybody, all the major medical organizations around the world support that. Few transgender basics. Trans women use estrogen, trans men use testosterone. Some have surgery, some don't. Causation, just like you to pause on this, there's a whole lot more to biology than just your genitals. And if you take a look at the sources on the bottom, Robert Sapolsky is a neurobiologist out of Stanford, has done some wonderful work, and Dr. Carissa Sambunmatsu out of the Los Alamos National Lab have some really good work. They've done the latest research on it, but it's basically, the research shows that there's a mismatch between hormonal washes when the genitals are exposed during the last portion of the first trimester and the brain is exposed during the second trimester. Populations, Wisconsin, we've got 19,000 folks here, plus. Military, about 15,000. And that's a little bit dated, that's 2014, 2015 information. It's hard to get an accurate number. Trans statistics, we're talking about discrimination, the kids. Some pretty awful numbers there, some things that they have to put up with. This was based on a 2015 survey that had 28,000 respondents. Trans adults, pretty much the same. The suicide rate for trans students or trans youth who do not have support within their family is north of 60%. When their family supports them, it falls back to a more normal, if you will, less than 10%. That's the difference. Current culture, a lot going on out there right now, particularly with trans kids. You can see from that, 230 this year, the trend is ticking up. Everything from girls, trans girls in athletics, to gender affirming care. 5 states are still holding on to the bathroom bill issue, curriculum. And we have 5 states that have criminalized affirming care so far. And I think I just read today where Florida is going to be the 6th. So I will say that Wisconsin has participated in that. We've had people across the street try to pass bills against girls in sports and gender affirming care. And I'm happy to say that those were not passed. They were either not voted on or died in committee as of March 15th. If you're interested in how to be an ally, I'm going to put some things up here. I think it really boils down to just treating people with dignity and respect. You might try calling your legislators, trans people. We are few in number. We can use all the help we can get. Fact-based discussions versus opinion. I can tell you about a conversation I had during my 50th high school reunion with someone that had some questions for me because, you know, she was Catholic. And if you want to have opinions, that's fine, that's your right. But when you start telling me about your opinions and comparing it to my lived events, we're not going to win those. Minds are made up. Again, just respect individual privacy. Pronouns go a long way. Education is good. There are some things that should be off limits. And if we can get the slide advanced here. Thank you. So what are the questions and answers? That's me in the upper left-hand corner at the beginning of my battles back in 2007. And that's me in the bottom right-hand corner. Actually, that's Maddie. If you're interested in learning more specifically about trans service members, the hard copy book is out. There's a copy of it on the back table. It's available at Amazon. It'll be coming out in paperback shortly. And with that, I'm more than happy to take your questions.
Thank you for the presentation. It's very helpful and, to me, supportive. So one question I have, because I've had kids in the military, and this whole idea of fraternization between officers and the enlisted seems to me to be similar in terms of conflict with what's going on in the area that you've been working on. Do you see any efforts to try to take down some of those barriers? Because they prevented servicemen and women from getting married when there was an officer and an enlisted involved.
Yes, I don't look at them as being similar at all. I'm looking, I mean, the case can be made that both of them are basic human rights to marry who you want to. The military, you know, is a totally different organization. There are some things that you give up when you join, the sacrifices you make. We hear about sacrifices a lot. That's one of them. Similar, but still dissimilar. And of course, the reason is for good, what should I say, good morale, good cohesion in the unit when you have officers and enlisted start mixing socially, and not that there aren't, but it can detract, especially if they're in the same chain of command.
Thank you very much for this 101 course for us. We all appreciate that and need it. And my question for you is, could you address the issue of sports and that's being talked about right now, where with male transgenders playing on female sports and that concern?
Yes, I sure can. Let me quote some facts. You know, I'm a researcher, that's why I put sources and citations on my slides. So Kentucky just passed a law to keep trans girls from competing on women's sports, girls athletics. They have one trans girl in the state that competes. Utah has 75,000 female athletes in K through 12. They have one also. So when we get to a point where we're passing laws because of single individuals, I think our lawmakers could be spending their time much better elsewhere. Specifically, Leah, I forget what her last name is, swimmer out of Penn State, has gotten a lot of publicity lately. She's an elite athlete. She transitioned, used to be on the men's swim team, transitioned after 2 or 3 years, came back, and is winning a few events. Even at the national title, I think she won one. I don't look at her, and first of all, the requirement is that their testosterone be less than a certain level. And I don't know anything about her medical history, whether or not she's had surgery, but I can tell you, I can share with you, and based on my own experience, when you have the genital surgery, you no longer have testosterone in your body at all. So I'm sitting here looking, everybody in this room has more testosterone in their body than I have. And if Leah had the surgery, I can tell you that her testosterone is going to go down and maybe even go away entirely. So I think it's overblown. She's been a swimmer, an avid swimmer, since the age of 5. That's a lot of hard work. A lot of people some people are upset about it, but I can tell you some people would think that that Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer's wingspan, was a biological advantage in his races on the male side. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi. I'm a little close to University of Kentucky swim and dive, so I have a little bit of knowledge on this. And Leah has not had the transitional surgery. I guess from my perspective, I try to rationalize from just a very pragmatic way. Someone who was not an elite swimmer as a man was 450th in the country, which is really just average, and goes from 1 year of testosterone blocking drugs to winning a national championship in the 2 years later. So from my perspective, you know, I concern. What is your rationale when you look at that? Because this is the 50th year of the Title IX, and I look at it from the standpoint of what is fair, because fair is one of the big issues with Title IX, and that's where I have a problem with it.
Right, thank you. So some folks, you know, are strongly against her swimming. And from my perspective, if she's been on estrogen and anti-androgens as required by the NCAA to swim, and her testosterone levels are lower than are the same or lower than the natal females, if you will, I'm not sure what the difference is. I'm not sure that the natal females have been swimming since the age of 5 competitively. So there's more to it than just, well, let me put it like this. I don't know of any transgender individual who would transition to and go through all of the stuff, the discrimination, the heartache, the loss, the financial pain, the surgeries, just to get an advantage racing in whether it's swimming or biking or anything. So if people think that trans people do that, for that reason, they're mistaken. So thanks for your question.
Thank you for your presentation. I just wondered if you could share a little bit more from your experience, particularly being an advocate as a veteran, and if that is more persuasive or how that comes across, particularly in advocacy around issues both related and maybe even unrelated. But I think there's right? Some of it comes from a position of respect, I would hope, in our community at large, and if that you feel has influenced advocacy opportunities for you or in others that you've.
Well, I think that, one of the reasons I'm asked to speak is because of the small platform that I have as the highest ranking out trans veteran in the country. But there's 134,000, there's probably 300,000 veterans that are out there that are trans that can do the same thing as me, maybe just not have had the opportunities. Maybe they didn't wait 55 years to share their secret with in my case, my spouse. And I'll be the first to admit that the experiences that I've had as a white male in the military gave me some distinct advantages. The leadership skills, the analysis skills, and everything that I've learned over my tenure. I would have learned them either way, but it fit in best with the folks. So I'm probably still a little bit privileged because of that. And so it's all about paying it forward and paying it back and make it easier for those who follow.
Thank you, Colonel Sheri. All right, and with that, Rotarians, we are adjourned.